Good morning. Welcome to Monday Morning with Tanny. This is a Facebook Live, and it also will be recorded and put on FCSS's YouTube, and I think sometimes it gets posted on Instagram. So today's Monday morning is our final kind of episode in the suicide survivor, suicide loss, grief series. We will be doing touchstones 9 and 10. For those of you who are joining who have not watched any of our episodes before, I am Tanny Reed Walker. I am a counselor. I work for Barons Rika Warner FCSS in southern Alberta. I have been doing these Monday morning series for several months now, so if you're new, you can go back and look through the other videos that we've done. If you haven't been watching, I also would like to share that I tend to follow Dr. Alan Wolfelt's work. Hi, Charisma, thanks for letting me know you're here and that you can probably hear me, which is lovely. I tend to follow his work. I pick a book and I go through it. I weave in some of the experiences that I've had as a counselor and personally, and also other stuff that comes into my awareness I like to share with people. So here's the book that I recommend people get, The Wilderness of Suicide Grief, Finding Your Way. This is a hardcover. It's small, it's got good chapters. It's a really lovely book to have. The one that I follow for this series is Understanding Your Suicide Grief, 10 Essential Touchstones for Finding Hope and Healing Your Heart. And it also has the option of buying the companion journal, which has a really great format where it's guided journaling to kind of be with you on your grief journey. I talk a lot about doing writing, and I talk a lot about how grief is the internal feelings and thoughts and images that we hold, and mourning is moving those out. So we don't want to leave those trapped inside us. We want to move them out, and that is how we learn how to integrate this loss into our lives. Oh, please share this with people. I understand it can be a difficult conversation to have, and sometimes just sharing a video can really launch things for people, or let them know that you're open to have conversations about loss, especially a loss like this one. Suicide loss is especially difficult because it's considered an out of order death. It's really has a lot of different connotations and taboos and all of that stuff around it, and I really hope that we can help make it something that people talk about and realize it's part of our lives. Okay, so touchstone 9 is seeking reconciliation, not resolution. So here's a quote from Dr. Alan Wolfelt. It's, "Unless you believe you are worthy of reconciliation and healing your suicide grief, you will question it, inhibit it, deny it, or push it away." So this is realizing that you are worthy of having a good life, and you are worthy of going through the process, through this wilderness of grief, to have that good life. And something that people sometimes get worried about, they think that if they go through the wilderness that the experience will be over, or they think they will stop grieving and they will stop mourning, and we don't. It becomes part of your world. It's just weaved into the fabric. I think of it as like another map that we're holding in our head. So every city that I go to, I tend to have a map in my brain, kind of where everything is. It gets fuzzy over time, but I remember the main points. And I remember I first noticed this as a young person when I went to Disneyland. So I went to Disneyland when I was, I think, in grade 4. And then many years later, like maybe 10 years later, I went back and I remembered so much of where everything was. That map was still in my head. So with grief and going through the wilderness of grief, you're going to go through it, but you're going to hold that map and know how that works in your world, and it's going to stay with you. You're not going to forget it. So you don't have to live in this wilderness forever, but it will be part of your world. And much like my going back to Disneyland, there's going to be times where you're suddenly back in that wilderness. But there's going to be parts along the way where you're like, oh, I recognize this. Oh, I know what to do in this situation. Oh, this is where I need to go down to the river and sit by the water and have memories of when we used to go fishing. Or, like, there's so many beautiful ways of revisiting that and knowing that you won't be stuck in that wilderness. So part of me feels like that's what reconciliation is. We're like connecting with that. We're reconciling. This happened, and this is how we move through it, and this is part of our life, and we just kind of incorporate it into our world. There's an anonymous quote in here. It's, "Mourning never really ends. Only as time goes on, it erupts less frequently." And that is huge. There's been times, lots of times for me, it's in the early morning when the sun's rising. That's when a loved one will pop into my mind. And I don't know if it's peaceful or if it's the hope of the day, but that hope somehow is also linked to the sorrow. Part of reconciliation is realizing you're not going to go backwards to normalcy. There is no going backwards. There is a forwards to a new normalcy and a new integration of your life. And you will learn that you can have a life without that person that is with you, or was with you, the person that has died by suicide. That takes a lot. That takes some time. All of those things that we've talked about all along are all part of this journey towards reconciliation. And, like I've also said, it's not linear. There'll be times when you're like, yep, I totally feel like I've got this. I understand. I know what's happening. I am better. And then, just out of the blue, another part will come in and be like, actually, this is something that we're going to address this time. And this is a part of your life we're going to look at this time. And you're going to need to pull up that map, that wilderness map that you've been going through, and be like, okay, here's where we are, here's what we do, and this is how we take care of ourselves. And notice that. It's not, this is how we get through it. This is how we take care of ourselves. Taking care of yourself and knowing your tools and remembering your tools is really, really important. So, how do you reach this? Well, you do it by intentionally mourning. So you're intentionally moving those feelings, as hard as it is, as uncomfortable as it is, those feelings and those thoughts and those images, moving them out. How do you do it? You talk it out. If you're the kind of person, and even if you're not, sometimes if you can find somebody safe to talk it out with, it's amazing. I often use a snowball analogy. So the thoughts and the feelings and the images, they roll and roll around in your head, and it's like a snowball when you're rolling it down the hill to make a big giant ball for the snowman. But it fills your head and there is no room for anything else. So talking about it, writing about it, crying about it, playing, you can play about it, painting, sculpting, dancing, anything to move that out is how you melt that ball so there's room for the rest of your brain, the rest of your life to run through your mind and help you out. We want to melt that snowball. That is how it works. And at first it can be so hard to move those feelings out and to move those images and thoughts out. But as time goes on, you become more practiced at it. That's how human beings work. Repetition makes for better practice. And sometimes you might be like, I haven't journaled in months. Then pick it up. If you're feeling that overwhelm and you're not taking care of it, pick up that journal. Or try something new. Try creating something. Dr. Alan Wolfelt talks about something called leaping towards your healing. And I'm going to actually read the story that he mentioned. A bunch of other stories came into my mind that were personal, and I don't have permission to share them, so I'll share his. A man had been walking near a cliff edge. He somehow got off the path, tripped, and fell over the edge. As he fell towards the ocean below, he grabbed a branch of thorns. Dangling there, refusing to let go, the man began to pray. Is there anybody there? Yes, came the reply. Who is it? Inquired the man. It's God. Oh, please help me, God, prayed the man. You have to let go and leap, said God. The man reflected on this for a moment and then prayed, Is there anybody else out there? I thought this was a good analogy because sometimes we want to have both. We want to hang on to the pain because it's really hard to move it out, and yet we want to be free to go on with our lives. And sometimes you have to brace yourself and take that big breath and take that leap to move that pain out. Leap towards what you want. And it's scary. Oh, it's scary. But that's what faith is. And that's what will get you there. Lots of times in movies, people will jump from something and I'm always like, but it's like they have no choice. They have no choice if they want to carry on. And I have the distinct impression that when you're in the wilderness of loss, that you have to do a lot of leaping. There's been times in my life when I was out hiking or something and then I was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place and I had to leap. And sometimes when I'd leap, I'd kind of fall and I'd roll, and sometimes I'd roll on a cactus because there's cactuses around here in our coulees, but I'd make it through. And I'd pluck those cactus needles out and I would breathe and live another day, and I'd have learned something about the terrain that I was going on. And that is very much how this works. You're in a new terrain, you're learning new things, and you have to leap. So there's some signs that Dr. Alan Wolfelt talks about that you're reconciling this loss in your life. And I'm just going to share them with you. So a recognition of the reality and finality of the death. So this is a slow process. It seems really, really fast sometimes. You're like, yeah, I totally understand that person's gone. But then you'll hear something, a creak in the door, and you're like, are they coming home? And you're like, oh no, they're not coming home. So it's an ongoing process. But when it becomes reconciled, it just is. Return to stable eating and sleeping patterns. A renewed sense of release from the person who has died. Excuse me. You will have thoughts about the person, but you will not be preoccupied by the thoughts. So they aren't going to be as invasive and keeping you up at night the same way. And remember, this isn't linear. It's and then back. And so it's ongoing. The capacity to enjoy experiences in life that are normally enjoyable. For a long time, you might find that you have difficulty having enjoyable moments, or you might be somebody who is able to have moments, just moments here and there. It's all depends on who you are. But when you've reconciled it, it becomes more constant. The establishment of new and healthy relationships. The capacity to live a full life without feelings of guilt or a lack of self-respect. A drive to organize and plan one's life towards the future. The serenity to become more comfortable with the way things are rather than trying to make it the way they were. I feel like with Christmas coming up, there's a lot of talk with people that I do talk with, and over the years, that they want to make it as much like that person's favorite Christmas stuff as possible. And that is a beautiful way to honor them. As time goes on, you might be able to let some of those things go and keep just the most valuable parts of it for you. You're not striving to continue making it exactly like it was. I even watched a movie recently, The Christmas Chronicles, where the dad died, and it wasn't from suicide, but he did die, and the family was really struggling with how to have Christmas. And in the end, Santa had made it look exactly like Dad would have done it. And I think that was soothing for them at the time. But I also think that as the years go on, they would probably create some other traditions and add new things in. And that is a sign of reconciliation. The versatility to welcome more change in your life, the awareness that you have allowed yourself to fully mourn and you have survived. If any of these, if you're watching, trigger a memory or something for you, please share. I would love that. And I think other people that are experiencing this live or in the replay would probably enjoy that too. The awareness that you have allowed yourself to fully mourn and that you have survived. Oh, I think I said that one. The awareness that you do not get over your grief. Instead, you have a new reality, meaning, and purpose in life. I don't think we get over people that we love. Even people that we loved in childhood, like our first crush, and we always remember them. Like, it's very hard to forget that stuff because we're emotionally attached. And so when somebody that we care about has died from suicide, we aren't going to get over them. That would mean we'd forget them. It just becomes weaved into the fabric of our lives. The acquaintance of new parts of yourself that you have discovered on your grief journey. That is something, nobody asks for this. Nobody wants this. Nobody needs this to happen to them so that they can learn about themselves. Like, that's a really icky thing to think about. However, you do learn about things. This has happened, and you are going to gain new skills and new understandings and new awarenesses as you travel through this. And when you're open to those and you realize those things and you embrace them as part of who you are, that's part of reconciling the new you. This is really creating a new you. Adjustment to new role changes that have resulted is the loss of the relationship. We've talked about roles in other videos, and again, you're learning new things about yourself and having to be a new person to other people in your world. And acknowledge the pain of the loss is an inherent part of life, resulting from the ability to give and receive love. That is a very hard one for some people. It's all relationships. All relationships, they all end. They all end one way or another. Relationship breakdown, through death, through moving. Like, there's so many different ways. And really realizing that And understanding that is part of reconciling, it's part of life. And I certainly hope that you do not decide to not love and not have relationships because of that fear. It is way too beautiful, and we are way too important on this planet to just cut ourselves off. Nobody needs that. We need to be human and be fully human and love and create and be together. Oh, those are big. Another quote from Dr. Alan Wolfelt today. Reconciliation is not anchored in the absence of sadness. It's anchored to the intention to heal your sadness and renew your capacity to give and receive love. That's what it is. You're healing that and realizing that you're here for giving and receiving love. And this is going to happen over time. It's not just a flash of lightning and all of a sudden you're in this spot. It weaves through. If I had a magic wand, I don't know if I would even still fix it. I think that humans are amazing and have such capacity to grow and be connected and learn, and it would be nice if this pain wasn't part of it, but I don't know if it would be the same. Here we go. Self-care. Self-care, self-care, self-care is the most important thing. You are with yourself 24/7. And that requires care. In Touchstone 7 and 8, I talk a lot about self-care. That's what they are. It's a prior video, 2 prior videos. And it's about taking care of yourself and also reaching out for help. So a big part of self-care for reconciliation is hope. Hope carries human beings through everything. Every time. Oh, Christmas Sun is saying self-care, self-care, self-care. I love it. Oh, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a generation of children that grew up to understand self-care? So having hope for your healing, having hope for new relationships, having hope for the future, having hope is really, really powerful. And so while you're having hope, you might also want to be understanding of your own timetable of expectations of reconciliation. So, are you expecting to heal faster than what is humanly possible? If you're watching this video, you're a human, and you have to realize that you're a human, and things do not move very quickly when we're people. Are you mistakenly giving yourself a deadline of when you should be over your grief? I do talk to people and they're like, yeah, I give myself this much time, or I give myself that much time, and I'm gentle. I don't want to crush their hope, but I also want to say it's great that you have an idea and are giving yourself space to grieve and mourn in this time, but be gentle with yourself. And then hopefully they have lots of supportive people and understanding that sometimes if you don't make your goal, it's okay. And if most often you don't reach your goal with what you were expecting, I think that hope is part of it. So it's kind of a fine line. Journaling. The journal, Dr. Alan Wolfelt, of course, likes the journal, but I think the journal is great because it asks lots of questions that we normally don't think about. So it's very good to express yourself. So we can't control how or when other people in our worlds die, and we can't control the fact that we do grieve, but we do have some power over mourning and the ability to do it. And that is very powerful. You have the ability to practice your mourning. Oh, here's a lovely quote from his book too. Hope is the feeling you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. And that's Gene Kerr. That's who wrote that. It's good to know that these feelings aren't going to last forever. I heard recently, actually it's probably been a while now, but it's stuck in my mind because it seems very true, is that we only hold a specific emotion for about 12 minutes. And if we really focus on it and stay there longer than necessary, then that's when we create suffering. So when we have that feeling and it's in us, we have the power to move it. And what's really cool is sometimes just acknowledging that thought. It's like, oh, that was an interesting thought that came in. Just acknowledging it, that it happened. Or a feeling. It's like, oh, I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now. What is that feeling? Oh, that feeling is like lonely and loss. And just acknowledging that can actually be enough to move it. So we do have hope, and it does flow. So keep that in mind. Excuse me. And then another quote. Oh, I'm enjoying the quotes today. You don't heal from the loss of a loved one because time passes. You heal because of what you do with that time. And that's Carol Crandall. So take the time. Living with hope is living with the anticipation of what can be. Sometimes when we're in the middle of the wilderness, you can't see or imagine anything else outside of it. But every wilderness has an edge. Every wilderness has another side. Every forest goes into a field. Like the landscape will change. And you will have a memory of that landscape, and it will stay with you, and it's part of you, but you don't need to live in there. Not forever. So a final word is, the word reconcile comes from the Middle English, and it is to make good again. So when you're moving towards reconciliation, you're making your life good again. My phone's almost never on. Sorry about that. Okay. Touchstone number 10. Appreciate your transformation. Nature does not know extinction. All it knows is transformation. And this is Wernher von Braun. So you have had a massive change in your life. When someone dies, and someone dies from suicide, you will be transformed. There is no way you can go through this process and be the same. You will be transformed. And like I said, you didn't ask for this. You certainly didn't need this to be transformed. This isn't the world giving you some lessons. It just is that you are going to change. And I'm sorry this happened to change you. I really, really am sorry for people who offer untimely comments like, you'll grow from this. Your right to be hurt, angry, or deeply sad is taken away from you if people are like, you're going to transform, you're going to change, this is great. You aren't ready for that, and you were not going to be grateful for this death. Your world could be 500 million times better in the face of other people. But that doesn't take away the pain or the fact that you didn't want this. So it's hard for me, even as a counselor, to talk with people, and it's a fine line, and I have to be so gentle and careful with exploring the transformations they're going through, that you're going through, because I don't want it to be untimely, and I don't ever want to make it seem like it was a good thing that your loved one has died, because it's not a good thing. It's a painful, painful thing. You creating your new life on the other end of it is beautiful and human. And I'm also so sorry that that happened. And that was one of the catalysts for your change. Instead of recovery, the best I can hope for is acceptance of how I have changed. Edward K. Reinierson. You are new, you are different, and you are transformed, and you will continue transforming. That's what humans do. We grow and we change. And you will never go back to the old balance. You will never go back to the old you. It is impossible. You are looking for that new balance, that new you, and understand that you will continue growing. You're going to explore your assumptions about life and death and all kinds of things, and that is part of understanding and appreciating your own transformation. Like, your thoughts are going to change. Your beliefs are going to change. And you're going to realize that you can weather a pretty intense journey. And if you're having any difficulties with weathering this journey, please reach out. There are people there to walk with you. And I hope that you are willing to find them, because you are important. And part of growing is understanding your potential, realizing what you do have to offer. I know, look at MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I believe their children were killed by drunk drivers. And they created this organization out of that. They made meaning on their own. I'm not saying your meaning has to be that big. I know that those mothers wish that they didn't ever have to create that. But part of our transformation is making that meaning and continuing to love our loved ones and continuing to move. Sometimes people who have had loved ones who've died from a suicide loss become suicide prevention supporters and advocates, and create support groups, and there's all kinds of things that can happen. Or you may just reach out to somebody who you know and be supportive that way. Grief calls us to realize our potential. There's a beautiful poem here, Your Responsibility to Live. Your joy is sorrow unmasked. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find that it is only that which has given you sorrow that has given you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Kahil Gibran. Oh, it's mixed together. Open your broken heart and rebuild it through time. Choose life. So nourish your transformed soul. Take care of your soul. Take care of you. Keep receiving help and support forever. Here's some things that Dr. Alan Wolfelt says he likes to do to nourish his soul. So he attends to those things in life that give his life richness and purpose. So realize what makes your heart sing. What are your passions? What makes it worth it? Again, this doesn't happen overnight. This takes time. So be kind to yourself. By trying to fulfill his destiny, by developing his soul's potential, by striving to give back what others have given to me. So those people that have been kind and wonderful and loving to you, you can't give back to them often in the moment. You can appreciate them and love them, but someday there'll be ways where you can love them and appreciate them with your purpose and your being. By learning to listen to what's going on around and within me to help me decide which direction I go. So that's listening to your own intuition, listening to yourself, just being aware of where you're supposed to be. It's kind of an expanded awareness thing. By having gratitude for family and friends, which I just talked about. By observing what is requesting my attention and giving attention to it. Lots of times things just kind of, I was like, okay, you didn't have to bonk me on the head to figure out that I needed to deal with this situation. So start to be a little bit more aware of things that you do need to, whether it's internally or externally. Finding passion to ministering to those in grief. That's what he does. That's something that I do. And by going into nature and having gratitude for the beauty of the universe. This morning I was out and about much earlier than normal, and it was fantastic because the sun was rising in the east and it was beautiful, and then in the west the moon was out. It's a full moon today. The moon was out and there was like a little bit of clouds over it, and it was so bright. And I was like, isn't that incredible that the sun is rising and the moon is out so bright, and it was like the world was split in half and I was right in the middle of it. It's those moments. Take them and bask in them. It only takes about 3 seconds of basking into those kind of awesome moments to like stick them into your brain and help raise your happiness level for like months after. So take the time. He uses praying that he lives on purpose and using his gifts, whether it's writing a book, teaching a workshop, or caring for his children. He sets time aside to go into exile and be by himself with stillness. And he earns his living doing something he loves to do, and by going through his own struggles and griefs, realizing that it's working through these wounds that helps him unite with others. And that's something I like to finish sharing. All people have things happen to them, and all people have to transform and change. And we talk a lot about our differences and how they make us unique, but I also like to talk about what we go through commonly as humans and help us be connected. That connection is vitally important. So you can spend some time with yourself, taking care of yourself and being introspected, but also take time to connect. And I know in these times it's a little bit more difficult to connect, but thankfully we have the social connections that we can do through technology. You can phone people, you can text people, you can look at their faces. And one more thing, if you are doing Zoom, keep your camera on. Let someone witness your tears when they come. Let people see your smiles when they come. Actually, let people see you and let yourself see them. Because that is how we have been forever. And it is a beautiful way of connecting and mourning and remembering that we're human. This was my final video in the Suicide Grief series. Next week I am doing Living in the Shadows of the Ghost of Grief. So I will be talking about unresolved, unreconciled griefs from past. I feel like it's a really good thing to bring us into the holiday season. A lot of people carry unresolved, unreconciled grief, and they are not sure what to do with it. And I'm going to be working on and helping you know what to do and how to do that. So thank you so much for taking this time for you. Thank you for listening. Please send me any comments or suggestions or questions. And I'm excited. My one viewer that I know for sure is here is excited about the next series. So I am grateful to all of you, and I am thankful that you're letting me be a piece of your, thank you, Matt, being a piece of your support, your equipment, whatever you want to call it as you're going through your wilderness. Until next time, next Monday, 10:30 Mountain Time. Bye.